Blood should not look black under moonlight. But I had seen enough dead men at Shiloh to know this. When blood flows, slow, cold, and pools on skin like pine tar, the victim is still alive, still waiting for someone to find them, or waiting to die. I stepped into the clearing beside Bitterroot Creek at 4 in the morning, not because I heard a cry for help. There was no sound at all. I came because the doe I had been tracking for half a mile stopped, turned her head, and bolted. Animals do not fear blood. They fear the smell of human terror. And when I saw her blonde hair matted with mud wrists, bound with military rope dress torn open, the first thing I recognized was not that someone had hurt her. It was how they had hurt her. The cut on her right wrist, 3 centimeters long, half a centimeter deep, avoiding the radial artery completely. The cut on her left hip, parallel to the ligament, never touching bone. This was not torture. This was an anatomy lesson. And I only knew one person in this world who cut with that kind of precision. The man I had taught how to do it 12 years ago. I knelt beside her in the dirt. My knees cracked. 41 years will do that to a man who has spent 13 winters sleeping on frozen ground. I pressed 2 fingers against her throat. Her pulse was there, faint but steady, the rhythm of someone who had given up screaming hours ago. Her eyes snapped open. No panic, no tears, just a flat, exhausted stare that told me she had been awake the entire time waiting. She looked at me the way a soldier looks at a field surgeon, like she knew I might save her, or finish what someone else started. I pulled my hunting knife from my belt. She did not flinch. That told me more than words ever could. I cut the rope at her wrists first. Her arms fell to her sides like dead weight. Blood rushed back into her hands and she gasped, but she did not cry out. I worked the knots at her ankles. Military issue manila hemp 3-strand twist, the kind we used at Fort Benton to secure medical supply crates. Whoever tied her knew what they were doing. When the last rope fell away, she tried to sit up. Her body would not cooperate. I caught her before she collapsed into the dirt. Up close I saw more. Faint bruises along her ribs, yellow and fading. Older scars near her collarbone, thin and precise. This was not the first time someone had used a blade on her. This was a pattern, a history. I lifted her into my arms. She weighed almost nothing. Too light for a woman her age, too weak. She turned her face toward mine and spoke for the first time. Her voice was dry, cracked, but clear. She said, "He told me you would come." I stopped walking. "Who?" I asked. "My husband," she whispered. "He said the cuts would bring you." I looked down at her wrist again, at the 3-centimeter incision that avoided every major vessel, at the angle of the blade entry, at the depth control. And I understood. This was not random violence. This was a message written in skin, a message only one man on earth would know how to read. I carried her toward my cabin without another word. My mind was already moving backward through the years, searching for a name I had tried to bury, a face I had tried to forget. Behind us, the forest remained silent. Even the wind had stopped, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what came next. The walk back to my cabin took 20 minutes. Normally I could make it in 12. But carrying her, watching for roots in the dark, listening for the sound of boots behind us, time stretched. She did not speak again. Her head rested against my chest, and I could feel her breathing. Short, shallow pulls, like her lungs did not trust the air anymore. I had heard that kind of breathing on battlefields. I hated that I recognized it. When we reached the cabin, I kicked the door open and laid her on the narrow bed in the corner. The same bed I had slept in alone for 13 years. The same bed where I woke every morning telling myself I would never practice medicine again. She opened her eyes and looked around, taking inventory. The wood stove, the table, the shelves lined with jars most men would not recognize, dried herbs, tinctures, suture threads sealed in glass. Her gaze stopped on a set of instruments wrapped in oiled cloth on the shelf above the basin. "You are a doctor," she said, not a question, a statement. Was I answered. I moved to the stove and built a fire. My hands worked automatically. Kindling first, then split pine, then a careful arrangement of larger logs. I had done this 10,000 times in the dark. Muscle memory does not forget, even when you want it to. While the fire caught, I filled a kettle with water from the barrel by the door and set it over the flame. Then I unwrapped the instruments. Silver gleamed in the firelight for just a second before I covered them with a clean cloth. She watched every movement. "You are not surprised," I said. "No, why not?" She turned her head toward the window. Dawn was starting to break pale gray light, creeping through the gaps in the shutters. "Because he has been talking about you for 5 years," she said quietly. "Since the day we married." I stopped moving. "What is your name?" I asked. "Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Hartwell." The name hit me like a fist to the chest. Hartwell. I stepped closer to the bed, looked at her face in the growing light. Blonde hair, green eyes, a small scar on her left eyebrow. And then I saw it. Pinned to the collar of her torn dress, a small brass butterfly, tarnished with age but unmistakable. I had given that pin to a 14-year-old girl 13 years ago at Fort Benton, a girl dying of blood infection after a riding accident, a girl whose father was my commanding officer, Captain James Hartwell. "You are his daughter," I said. Eleanor nodded once. "He died 3 years ago," she said. "But before he did, he told me about you, about Fort Benton, about the surgeon who saved my life and then disappeared." I sat down in the chair beside the bed. My legs suddenly felt weak. "He also told me," Eleanor continued, her voice steady, "now that you were the best surgeon he ever saw, and the most dangerous." I looked at the floor, at the bloodstains on my boots, at my hands scarred and calloused from years of splitting wood and skinning elk. "Did he tell you why he discharged me?" I asked. "No," she said, "but my husband did." The room went silent except for the crackle of the fire. "Who is your husband?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She reached up slowly and pulled the collar of her dress down, just enough to expose her collarbone. Carved into the skin, thin and precise, were letters. T.C. 1874, Fort Benton. My initials, the year I left, the place I left from. "His name is Nathaniel Carver," Eleanor said, "and he told me he learned everything from you." I stood up so fast the chair fell backward. Nathaniel Carver, 19 years old, brilliant, obsessive, the kind of student who memorized Gray's Anatomy in 3 months and could perform a flawless amputation by his 2nd year. The kind of student who asked questions no one should ask. I remembered the day I found him in the medical tent after hours, standing over a Confederate prisoner. The man was alive, conscious, and Nathaniel had made 6 shallow incisions along his rib cage, not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to learn. "How long can a man stay awake if you cut here?" Nathaniel had asked me, calm as Sunday morning. "I want to know the threshold." I reported him to Captain Hartwell the next day. But Nathaniel's father was a senator, and the Union needed surgeons more than it needed justice. So they made Nathaniel resign quietly. No trial, no record, just a handshake and a train ticket west. And I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. "How long have you been married to him?" I asked. 5 years. "And the cuts, when did they start?" Eleanor looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Our wedding night," she said. I turned away and walked to the window. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. The kind of rage that has nowhere to go except inward. Outside, the sun was rising over the Bitterroot Valley. Golden light spilled across the pines. Beautiful, peaceful, a lie. "Why did you stay?" I asked. "Where would I go?" she said. "He is the sheriff. Everyone in town loves him, trusts him. If I ran, he would find me, and he would make it look like I was insane or criminal or worse." She paused. "He told me that on our wedding night, too." I turned back to face her. "Why tie you to those trees?" I asked. Eleanor reached into the torn pocket of her dress and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. Her hands were shaking now. She held it out to me. I took it, unfolded it carefully. Inside was a list. 8 names, all women. Beside each name a date and a single word transferred. "I found this in his study 2 weeks ago," Eleanor said. "Hidden inside a medical journal. I confronted him. And he said I had a choice. I could forget what I saw, or I could see what happens to women who do not forget." She gestured weakly toward her wrists, toward the cuts. "He tied me there yesterday morning," she continued. "He said it was a test, to see how long I would last, to see if I was strong enough to survive what came next." I looked at the list again, read the names, none of them familiar, except the last one. Mei Ling Wei, daughter. Age 16, Transferred 1879. I knew that name. Mei Ling Wei ran the apothecary in town, a Chinese woman who had lived in Bitterroot Valley for 20 years. I bought herbs from her twice a year when I came down from the mountain. I had never known she had a daughter. "What does transferred mean?" I asked. Eleanor closed her eyes. "I do not know," she said. "But 2 months ago a woman came to our house, late at night. She was looking for her sister. One of the names on that list. Nathaniel told her the sister had been sent to a women's reformatory in Helena. And the woman went to Helena. She came back 3 weeks later. There was no record, no sister, nothing." Eleanor opened her eyes again. She confronted Nathaniel in the street, in front of everyone. She called him a liar. What did he do? He arrested her for public disturbance. She spent 1 night in the jail. The next morning, she was gone. "Transferred," he said, "to the territorial prison." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper, but I saw her name added to the list that same night. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. The kettle was boiling now. Steam poured from the spout. I took it off the flame and poured hot water into a tin basin. Then I unwrapped the instruments. Scalpel, forceps, needle, thread. Eleanor watched me. "What are you doing?" she asked. "The cuts are clean," I said, "but they will still get infected if I do not close them properly. You do not have to do this." I looked at her. "Yes," I said, "I do." I washed my hands in the hot water, dried them on a clean cloth. Then I sat beside the bed and examined the wound on her wrist. The edges were neat, no tearing, no hesitation marks. Whoever made this cut knew exactly what they were doing. I threaded the needle. "This is going to hurt," I said. Eleanor nodded. I worked quickly, 3 stitches on the wrist, 5 on the hip. She bit down on a folded strip of cloth and made almost no sound. When I finished, I wrapped both wounds in clean linen and tied them off. "You will need to change the bandages every day," I said, "and keep them dry." "Thank you," she whispered. I stood up and cleaned the instruments in silence, put them back in the oiled cloth, put the cloth back on the shelf. Then I turned to face her. "You said he carved my initials into your skin on your wedding night," I said. "Why?" Eleanor looked at me for a long time before she answered. "Because he said you were the only man who ever understood him," she said, "and he wanted me to remember that I belonged to your legacy." She reached into her dress again. This time she pulled out something small and round, a pocket watch, brass, tarnished. She held it out to me. I took it, turned it over. Engraved on the back, T.C. from J.H., 1874. My watch, the one Captain Hartwell gave me after I saved his daughter. The one I lost the night I left Fort Benton in the middle of winter with nothing but a horse and a rifle. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Nathaniel gave it to me," Eleanor said. "On our wedding night. He said it was a gift, a reminder of the man who taught him to see the human body as a machine." I opened the watch. Inside, tucked against the face, was a small photograph, faded, cracked at the edges. 5 men in Union Medical Corps uniforms, standing in front of a tent. Fort Benton, winter, 1874. I recognized myself immediately, 28 years old, clean-shaven, confident. Standing beside me was Nathaniel Carver, 19, thin, smiling. On the back of the photograph, someone had written in careful script, "The Surgeon's Circle." 5 men who knew where to cut. I stared at the photograph. The other 3 men in the picture, I remembered their names. Thomas Wade, Benjamin Cross, Daniel Park. All of them former students of mine. All of them discharged from the Army within a year of my departure. "Eleanor," I said slowly, "do you know what happened to the other men in this photograph?" She nodded. "Nathaniel told me," she said. "Thomas Wade died in a fire in Denver, 1876. Benjamin Cross drowned in the Snake River, 1878. Daniel Park was shot during a robbery in Cheyenne, 1880. I felt cold. 3 men, I said, 3 deaths, all accidents. Eleanor looked at me with those exhausted green eyes. "Nathaniel does not believe in accidents," she said. The fire in the stove popped, a log shifted, and sparks flew up the chimney. Outside, the sun had fully risen now. Birds were singing. Somewhere down the valley, a dog barked. Normal sounds, a normal morning. But nothing about this was normal. I sat down in the chair again, put the watch on the table, stared at the photograph. 5 men who knew where to cut. And now 3 of them were dead. "He is coming for you," Eleanor said quietly. That is why he tied me to those trees. He knew you would find me. He knows you live up here. He has always known." "How long has he been planning this?" I asked. "Since the day he became sheriff," she said. 6 years ago. He told me once late at night after too much whiskey that everything he did was leading to one moment, the moment when he could prove he was better than his teacher." She paused. "He said you ran because you were afraid of what you created, and he wanted to show you that he was not afraid." I looked at the cuts on her wrist, at the initials carved into her collarbone. Nathaniel had not hurt Eleanor because he hated her. He hurt her because she was bait, and I had taken it. "You need to leave," I said. "Get as far from here as you can. Take a horse, ride east. Do not stop until you reach Helena." Eleanor shook her head. "He will find me," she said. "He always does. Then I will make sure he does not follow." "You do not understand," she said, her voice rising slightly. "He does not want to kill you. He wants you to operate. He wants you to teach him one more thing." "What?" Eleanor looked away. "How to keep someone alive forever while they beg to die." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stood up and walked to the door, opened it, looked out at the valley. Somewhere down there in the town I avoided for 13 years, a man was waiting. A man I had taught. A man I had created. And now he wanted to finish the lesson. I closed the door and turned back to Eleanor. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "He will come at dusk," she said. "He always works at dusk, when the light is low and people are going home, when no one is paying attention." I looked at the window. The sun was 3 hours past dawn. That gave us 9 hours. 9 hours to decide whether to run or fight. 9 hours to prepare for a man who knew every way the human body could break. Because Nathaniel Carver was not coming alone. He was coming with everything I had taught him. And God help me, I had taught him well. I walked to the shelf and took down the instruments again. This time, I did not wrap them back up. I laid them out on the table one by one. Scalpel, forceps, bone saw, needle, thread. Tools of healing, or tools of harm. The difference had always been in the hands that held them. Eleanor watched me from the bed. "What are you doing?" she asked. I picked up the scalpel, tested the edge against my thumb, still sharp after all these years. "I am remembering," I said. "Remembering what?" I looked at her. "How to be the surgeon he thinks I am." Because if Nathaniel wanted a lesson, I would give him one, but not the lesson he expected. The fire burned low, the morning stretched long, and somewhere in the valley below a man in a sheriff's badge was saddling his horse, coming for the teacher who ran, coming for the ghost he could not let die. And I would be waiting, not because I wanted this fight, but because 13 years ago I taught a brilliant young man how to cut without killing. And now I had to teach him something I should have taught him from the beginning, that some wounds never heal, and some lessons should never be learned. The town of Bitterroot lay 3 miles down the mountain, nestled in the valley, where the creek split into 2 fingers. I had not set foot there in 2 years, not since the winter of 1885, when I traded elk meat for salt and lamp oil and swore I would never return. I preferred it that way. Towns had a way of asking questions, and I had spent 13 years becoming a man with no answers to give. But Eleanor's words had changed that. "He will come at dusk." I looked at her now sleeping fitfully on my bed. The fever had started an hour after I stitched her wounds. Not unexpected. Her body was fighting infection and exhaustion and fear all at once. I had given her willow bark tea and covered her with every blanket I owned. Now all I could do was wait and let her body decide if it wanted to keep fighting. I strapped my rifle across my back and checked my revolver. 6 rounds. I had not fired it in 2 years, but I kept it clean out of habit. Muscle memory from a war I thought I had left behind. Outside the morning had turned cold. Clouds were moving in from the west, heavy and gray. Snow before nightfall, the kind that came early in October and buried the valley until April. I started walking. The trail down was steep and narrow, cutting through pine forest so thick the sun barely touched the ground. My boots found the path automatically. I had walked it 1,000 times in the dark. Halfway down I stopped. There were tracks in the mud, fresh, boot prints coming up the mountain. 2 men, maybe 3. They had passed here less than an hour ago. I knelt and studied the impressions. One set was deep heavy, A big man. The other two were lighter, closer together, moving fast. They had not reached my cabin yet, or I would have heard them, which meant they were circling, looking for another approach, or waiting for dark. I stood and kept walking, but slower now, listening. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, just the sound of wind moving through the high branches. When I reached the edge of town, I stopped in the tree line and watched. Main Street was empty except for 2 horses tied outside the saloon and a wagon parked in front of the general store. Normal for a Tuesday morning. Most men were out working claims or tending cattle. The women would be inside cooking or mending or teaching children. I scanned the buildings until I found what I was looking for. The apothecary. A small wooden structure with Chinese characters painted on the door. Mei Ling Wei's shop. I waited 5 minutes. No one entered, no one left. Then I stepped out of the trees and crossed the street. The bell above the door chimed when I entered. The shop smelled like dried ginger and camphor and something sweet I could not name. Shelves lined every wall stacked with jars and bottles and paper packets tied with string. Mei Ling stood behind the counter grinding something in a stone mortar. She looked up when she heard the bell. Her face did not change, but her hands stopped moving. "Mr. Cord," she said quietly, "you should not be here." I closed the door behind me. "I need to ask you about your daughter," I said. The mortar slipped from her hands and clattered on the counter. Fine powder spilled across the wood. Mei Ling stared at me. For a moment I thought she might cry, but she did not. She just closed her eyes and took a long breath. "Who told you?" she asked. "Eleanor Hartwell." Mei Ling opened her eyes. Something flickered there. Not surprise, recognition. "She found the list," Mei Ling said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Is she alive?" "For now." Mei Ling nodded slowly. She walked to the front window and pulled the curtain closed. Then she turned the sign on the door to say, "Closed." "Sit," she said, gesturing to a small stool in the corner. I sat. She poured tea from a pot on the stove and handed me a cup. Then she sat across from me on a wooden crate. "My daughter's name was Lynn," she said. 16 years old. Beautiful. Smart. She wanted to be a teacher. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she held her tea. "The sheriff came to my shop one night, late, after everyone had gone home. He said there had been complaints, that someone reported me for selling opium. Were you?" "No, but he did not care. He said he could arrest me right then, close my shop, send me to prison, or I could cooperate." "What did he want?" Mei Ling looked into her tea. "He wanted Lynn," she said. "He said she would work as a housemaid for a family in Helena, good pay, safe. He said it was better than staying here where people did not trust the Chinese." She paused. I believed him. I let her go. I waited. 2 months later, I received a letter from a hospital in San Francisco. They said Lynn had been admitted with pneumonia. They asked if I wanted to claim the body. Her voice cracked on the last word. I took every dollar I had saved. I went to San Francisco. But when I got there, the hospital had no record. No body, no Lynn. A tear ran down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. I went to the police. They told me girls like Lynn ran away all the time, that she probably found work in a brothel and did not want to be found. They told me to go home. And you came back here. Where else could I go? This shop is all I have. And I thought maybe she would come home. But she never did. No. I set my tea down. How many other women disappeared? I asked. Mei Ling looked at me with eyes that had cried every tear they had. 8 that I know of, she said. Maybe more. All young, all without families who could fight back. Chinese, Indian, one Irish girl whose parents died of fever. And the sheriff took them all. Not just him, he had help. Who? Mei Ling hesitated. If I tell you, she said, he will know, and he will come for me. He is already coming, I said, for both of us. She studied my face for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the back of the shop. She moved aside a stack of crates and pulled up a loose floorboard. From beneath it she took out a small leather journal. She handed it to me. I have been keeping records, she said. Every girl who disappeared, every date, every detail I could learn. I opened the journal, page after page of careful handwriting, names, ages, last known locations, and beside each entry a note. Transferred by Sheriff N. Carver. Transferred by Sheriff N. Carver. Transferred by Sheriff N. Carver. Where did they go? I asked. I do not know for certain, Mei Ling said. But 3 years ago a man came through town, a doctor from the East. He stayed one night at the boarding house. He was drunk, he talked. What did he say? He said there were hospitals that paid good money for subjects, people no one would miss, people they could use for medical experiments, testing new procedures, new medicines. My stomach turned cold. He said the territories were the best place to find them, Mei Ling continued, because out here no one asks questions, and sheriffs know who will not be missed. I closed the journal. Nathaniel is selling them, I said. Yes? To medical schools. I think so. I stood up. Where is your son? I asked. Mei Ling looked confused. My son, Samuel Wei, the deputy. Her face went pale. How do you know about Samuel? I saw him on the list, as a contact. Mei Ling shook her head quickly. No, Samuel does not know. He thinks Lin ran away. I never told him the truth. Why not? Because he would try to kill the sheriff, and the sheriff would kill him first. I walked to the window and looked out through a gap in the curtain. The street was still empty, but I could feel it now, the weight of eyes watching, waiting. Samuel is a deputy, I said. He works for Nathaniel. He had no choice, Mei Ling said. The sheriff offered him the job 2 years ago. Good pay, respect. Samuel thought it would help me, help us rebuild after Lin. She stood beside me. Please, she said, do not tell him. It will destroy him. I looked at her. He deserves to know the truth. The truth will kill him. The lie already has. Mei Ling turned away. She was crying now, quietly, the kind of crying that comes from years of holding everything inside. I put my hand on her shoulder. I am going to stop this, I said, but I need your help. She looked up at me. What can I do? Where does Nathaniel keep the women before he transfers them? Mei Ling wiped her eyes. There is a room, she said, beneath his house. He told the town it was a root cellar, but I have seen him take women down there, late at night when he thinks no one is watching. How many are there now? I do not know, but 4 weeks ago a girl went missing, Rose Calloway, 19 years old. She worked at the school. I remembered the name from Eleanor's list. Is she still alive? I think so. I heard the sheriff talking to Samuel. He said Rose was sick, that she needed medical attention. What kind of sick? Infection. In her leg. I felt my jaw tighten. Gangrene. Left untreated, it would kill her in days. But treated correctly, it could be managed, controlled. Nathaniel was not letting her die. He was keeping her alive just long enough to prove a point, to prove he could. The door to the apothecary rattled. Someone was trying to open it. Mei Ling and I both froze. A voice called from outside, Ma, are you in there, Samuel Wei? Mei Ling looked at me with panic in her eyes. I shook my head, gestured to the back room. She understood. She walked to the door and unlocked it. Samuel stepped inside. He was young, maybe 29, with his mother's eyes and his father's broad shoulders. He wore a deputy badge on his chest and a revolver on his hip. He saw me immediately. His hand moved toward his gun. Mr. Cord, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. What are you doing here? Buying medicine, I said calmly. The shop is closed. Your mother opened it for me. Samuel looked at Mei Ling. She nodded, her face carefully neutral. What kind of medicine? Samuel asked. Willow bark, for fever. You could have bought that last winter. I ran out. Samuel studied me. He knew I was lying, but he did not know why. The sheriff is looking for you, he said. Why, his wife is missing. He thinks you might know something about it. I met his eyes. Why would he think that? Because you are the only man within 50 miles who lives alone in the mountains and does not come to town. That does not make me a kidnapper. No, but it makes you suspicious. I could see the conflict in his face. He did not want to believe his boss, but he did not want to doubt him either. "Where is Eleanor?" I asked. Samuel's hand tightened on his gun. "How do you know her name?" "The sheriff told me, last time I was in town." Another lie. But Samuel did not know that. "She is missing," Samuel said. "Since yesterday morning. The sheriff found rope and blood near the creek. He thinks someone took her, and he thinks it was me. You are a suspect." I stepped closer. Samuel's hand moved to his gun, but he did not draw. "Let me ask you something, Deputy," I said. "How well do you know the man you work for?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Well enough. Do you know what he keeps in the room beneath his house?" Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, fear or recognition. "That is none of your business," he said. "It is if there are women locked down there." Samuel drew his gun. "You need to come with me," he said. "Now." Mei Ling stepped between us. "Samuel," she said quietly, "put the gun down. Ma, stay out of this. Listen to me." I said, "Stay out of this." Mei Ling reached up and put her hand on his chest. "Your sister did not run away," she said. Samuel froze. The gun in his hand trembled. "What?" he whispered. "Lynn did not run away," Mei Ling repeated. "The sheriff took her. He told me she was going to work in Helena, but she never arrived. She is gone, Samuel, and I think she is dead." Samuel's face went white. He looked at me, then at his mother, then back at me. "You are lying," he said, but his voice cracked. "I wish I was," Mei Ling said. She pulled the journal from her apron pocket and held it out. "Read it," she said, "all of it, and then tell me I am lying." Samuel took the journal with shaking hands. He opened it, read the first page, then the second. His eyes moved faster and faster. When he reached Lynn's name, he stopped. His hand dropped to his side. The journal fell to the floor. "No," he whispered. "No." Mei Ling was crying again. "I am sorry," she said. "I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid. I am so sorry." Samuel looked at me. "You knew," he said. "I found out this morning." "From who?" "Eleanor Hartwell." Samuel's face twisted with rage and grief. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Safe." "Where?" "My cabin." Samuel raised his gun again. This time he pointed it directly at my chest. "Take me to her," he said. "Now, or I swear to God I will shoot you where you stand." I looked at him, saw the pain in his eyes, the betrayal, the need to hurt someone the way he had been hurt. I understood that need. "All right," I said, "but first you need to see something." "What?" "The room beneath the sheriff's house." Samuel shook his head. "I am not breaking into his home." "You are not breaking in. You are investigating a missing person. He is my boss. He is a killer. You do not know that." I bent down and picked up the journal, opened it to the last entry. Rose Calloway, age 19, last seen October 8th, transferred by Sheriff N. Carver. "She is in that room right now," I said, "dying, and if we do not get her out, she will be another name in this book." Samuel stared at the page, his gun lowered slowly. "If you are wrong," he said, "I will arrest you myself." "And if I am right?" Samuel did not answer, but I saw it in his eyes. If I was right, everything he believed about the man he worked for would collapse, and he would have to choose between the badge he wore and the sister he lost. We left Mei Ling at the shop and walked toward the sheriff's house. It stood at the edge of town, a two-story structure with white paint and black shutters. Neat, respectable, the kind of house that told everyone its owner was a man of standing, the kind of house that hid its secrets well. Samuel had a key. He unlocked the front door and we stepped inside. The house was empty, clean, everything in its place. A parlor with lace curtains, a kitchen with copper pots hanging from hooks, stairs leading up to the second floor, and a door beneath those stairs, locked with a padlock. Samuel stared at it. "I have never been down there," he said quietly. "Why not?" "The sheriff said it was private. Medical supplies, things from his time in the war." I walked to the door and examined the lock. Heavy, new. "Do you have a key?" I asked. "No." I pulled a thin piece of wire from my coat pocket, something I had carried since my army days. useful for cleaning instruments and other things. I worked the wire into the lock, felt for the pins. It took me 30 seconds. The lock clicked open. I pulled it free and handed it to Samuel. He looked at me. "How did you learn to do that?" he asked. "The Army teaches a lot of things they do not put in the manual," I said. I opened the door. A staircase led down into darkness. The air that came up smelled like carbolic acid and old blood. Samuel pulled a match from his pocket and struck it. The light flared. We descended slowly. At the bottom there was another door. This one was not locked. I pushed it open. The room was larger than I expected, 20 feet across, shelves along one wall stacked with bottles and jars, a table in the center with leather restraints bolted to the wood, instruments laid out on a cloth, scalpel, saw, forceps. And in the corner, chained to the wall, was Rose Calloway. She was alive, barely. Her skin was gray. Her right leg was swollen and dark from the knee down. Gangrene. She looked up when we entered. Her eyes were glassy with fever. "Help me," she whispered. Samuel dropped the match. In the darkness, I heard him breathing. Fast. Shallow. Then I heard him vomit. I struck another match and walked to Rose, knelt beside her, checked her pulse, weak but steady. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "I do not know," she said. "Maybe 2 weeks. Time stopped meaning anything down here." "Did the sheriff do this to you?" She nodded. "He said I stole from the school, but I did not. He just needed a reason to arrest me." I looked at her leg. The infection had spread. She had hours left, maybe less. "I can save you," I said. "But I have to take the leg." Rose started crying. "Please do not," she said. "Please. If I do not, you will die. Then let me die." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me," I said. "You are 19 years old. You have a whole life ahead of you. Do not let him take that from you." She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Will it hurt?" "Yes." "How much?" "A lot. But not for long." She closed her eyes. "Do it," she whispered. Samuel was standing in the doorway now, pale, shaking. "We need to get her out of here," he said. "Not yet," I said. "If I move her now, she will bleed out before we reach the door. Then what do we do? I operate. Here, now. You do not have the tools?" I gestured to the table. "He does." Samuel looked at the instruments, at the restraints, at the bloodstains on the wood. "This is where he did it," Samuel said. "This is where he hurt them." "Yes." "All of them." "Yes." Samuel walked to the table. He picked up the scalpel, held it to the light. "He used this on my sister," he said. I did not answer. Samuel set the scalpel down carefully. Then he turned to me. "What do you need?" he asked. "Light, water, clean cloth, and something for her to bite down on." "I will get it." He ran up the stairs. I turned back to Rose. "This is going to be fast," I said. "But I need you to stay still. Can you do that?" She nodded. "Good girl." Samuel returned with a lantern, a bucket of water, and a stack of kitchen towels. He also brought a leather belt. "For her to bite," he said. I took it and folded it, placed it between Rose's teeth. Then I washed my hands, cleaned the instruments, laid them out in order. Scalpel, saw, needle, thread. I had not performed an amputation in 13 years, but some things the body does not forget. I looked at Samuel. "Hold her shoulders," I said. "No matter what happens, do not let go." He moved behind her, put his hands on her shoulders. Rose looked up at me one last time. "I am scared," she said. "I know," I said. "So am I." Then I picked up the scalpel, and I began to cut. The surgery took 70 minutes, 40 minutes of holding a scalpel I had sworn never to touch again. 40 minutes of cutting through muscle and tendon and bone while Rose Calloway screamed into the leather belt. 40 minutes of remembering every lesson I had taught myself to forget. But she lived. When I tied off the last stitch and wrapped the stump in clean linen, Rose passed out from exhaustion. Her breathing steadied. The gray color left her face. Samuel stood against the wall, pale and silent. He had not let go of her shoulders once during the entire procedure. Now his hands were shaking so badly he could not make a fist. I washed the blood from my hands in the bucket. The water turned dark red. "We need to move her," I said. Samuel nodded but did not speak. I lifted Rose carefully. She was light, too light. Nathaniel had not been feeding her. We carried her up the stairs and out of that house. The afternoon sun was bright after the darkness of the basement. It hurt my eyes. Samuel locked the front door behind us like nothing had happened, like we had just paid a social call. But his hands were still shaking. We took Rose to the church. Father Dominic Hayes was sweeping the steps when we arrived. He looked up and saw us, saw the blood on my clothes, saw Rose unconscious in my arms. He did not ask questions. He just opened the door. "Put her in the back room," he said. "There is a bed." I laid Rose down on a narrow cot beneath a window. Father Dominic brought blankets and water. He moved with the efficiency of a man who had done this before. "She will need watching," I said. "The fever will come back, and the wound needs to be cleaned every few hours." "I will see to it," Father Dominic said. He looked at me closely. His eyes were the same pale blue I remembered from Fort Benton, older now, more tired, but still sharp. "Tobias Cord," he said quietly. "I wondered when you would come down from that mountain. You know me. I served with you, Fort Benton Medical Corps, 1873 to 1875. I was an assistant surgeon." I studied his face, tried to remember. There had been so many young men passing through those medical tents, so many faces. "Dominic Hayes," he continued, "you probably do not remember me. I was not very good. I fainted during my first amputation. You told the captain I was better suited for chaplain work." I did remember then, a thin young man with trembling hands and a Bible in his pocket. "You took my advice," I said. "Best decision I ever made." Father Dominic looked at Samuel, who was standing in the doorway like he did not know whether to leave or stay. "Deputy Way," Father Dominic said, "you look like you have seen a ghost." "Something like that," Samuel said. "Would you like to confess?" "I am not Catholic. Neither am I. But sometimes a man needs to speak and know God is listening." Samuel looked at the floor. "My sister is dead," he said, "and I worked for the man who killed her." Father Dominic did not look surprised. "Lin Way," he said. Samuel's head snapped up. "You knew." "I suspected, but I could not prove anything. And in this town, suspicion without proof is just gossip. You should have said something." "To who? The sheriff?" Samuel's face twisted with anger and shame. "I should have known," he said. "I should have seen it. You saw what he wanted you to see." Father Dominic said gently, "That is what men like Nathaniel Carver do. They build a wall of trust around themselves. And by the time you see the cracks, it is too late." I walked to the window and looked out at Main Street. A few people were moving about now, a woman with a basket, a man loading supplies onto a wagon, normal life continuing while the world underneath it rotted. "Where is the sheriff now?" I asked. Father Dominic checked his pocket watch. "He rode out this morning with 2 men, heading north. He told people he was tracking his wife's kidnapper. He is coming for me." "Yes." "How much time do I have?" "If he is smart, he will wait until dark, come at you when you cannot see him coming." I looked at the sun. It was past noon now, 4 hours until dusk, maybe 5. "I need to get back to Eleanor," I said. Samuel stepped forward. "I am coming with you." "No, he killed my sister. I have a right. You have a badge, and if you shoot him, it is murder. If I shoot him, it is self-defense. I do not care about the law anymore." "Yes, you do. That is why you are standing in a church instead of hunting him down right now." Samuel opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He knew I was right. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Stay here, protect Rose. If Nathaniel comes back before I do, you tell him you found her wandering in the street, delirious from fever. You brought her here to recover. He will not believe that. He does not have to believe it. He just has to hear it. And while he is trying to figure out what you know, I will be ready for him." Father Dominic put a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Listen to him, son. Revenge will not bring your sister back, but justice might stop him from taking someone else's." Samuel looked at Rose unconscious on the cot. Then at me. "If you kill him," Samuel said, "make sure he knows why." I nodded. Then I walked out of the church and headed back toward the mountain. The trail up was harder than the trail down. My legs were tired. My hands ached from the surgery. And my mind was full of things I did not want to think about. Like how easily the scalpel had felt in my hand. Like how precisely I had known where to cut. Like how Nathaniel Carver had learned everything he knew from watching me. Halfway up I stopped to rest, sat on a fallen log, and looked down at the valley. Bitterroot was a beautiful town from this distance. Peaceful, the kind of place people move to for a fresh start. But I knew what lived beneath that beauty now, and I knew that Nathaniel had been right about one thing. I had run. Not because I was afraid of what I had done, but because I was afraid of what I was capable of doing again. The sun was lower now, the shadows longer. I needed to move. I stood and continued up the trail. When I reached my cabin, I found Eleanor awake and standing by the window. She had wrapped herself in a blanket and her face was still pale, but her eyes were clear. "You came back," she said. "Did you think I would not—" I did not know. I closed the door and bolted it. Then I checked the shutters on the windows, made sure they were secure. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Weak, but better. The fever, gone." I touched her forehead, cool. She was telling the truth. "Good," I said, "because we do not have much time." I told her about the basement, about Rose, about Samuel. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat down on the bed and was quiet for a long moment. "Rose Calloway was my student," she said finally. "I taught her to read when she was 7 years old. She used to bring me wildflowers." Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched in her lap. "Nathaniel told me she ran away with a ranch hand," Eleanor continued. "He said she was foolish and ungrateful. I believed him. You did not know. I should have. I lived with him for 5 years. I saw the signs, the late nights, the locked rooms, the women who disappeared. But I told myself it was none of my business, that I was imagining things." She looked up at me. "I was a coward." "No, you were surviving." "Is there a difference?" I sat down beside her. "Yes," I said. "A coward runs and never looks back. You stayed. You gathered evidence. You waited for the right moment. That is not cowardice. That is strategy." Eleanor almost smiled. "You are being kind. I am being honest." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the folded list, the one with 8 names. "I want to know what happened to them," she said. "All of them, even if they are dead. Their families deserve to know." "We will find out," I said, "after tonight." "You think he's coming?" "I know he's coming." Eleanor stood and walked to the table where I had laid out the instruments earlier. She picked up the scalpel, tested the weight of it. "Will you teach me?" she asked. "Teach you what? How to use this, how to defend myself." I took the scalpel from her hand gently. "A scalpel is not a weapon," I said. "It is a tool, and tools are only as good as the intention behind them." "Then teach me the intention." I looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had kept her alive through 5 years of marriage to a monster. "All right," I said, "but not with a blade, with knowledge." I spent the next 2 hours teaching Eleanor basic anatomy, where the major arteries were, where a man was most vulnerable, how to recognize the difference between a wound that would kill and a wound that would only disable. She learned quickly, asking questions, taking mental notes, and I realized something as I taught her. This was what I should have been doing all along, not teaching men how to hurt, but teaching people how to protect themselves from those who would. When the sun touched the horizon, I stopped. "That is enough," I said. Eleanor looked out the window at the fading light. "He will come soon," she said. "Yes." "What will you do?" "I will talk to him first, try to make him understand that this has to end." "And if he does not listen?" I did not answer. Eleanor walked to me, put her hand on my arm. "Tobias," she said, "if you have to kill him, I will not judge you. He stopped being my husband a long time ago." "I do not want to kill him." "Why not?" "Because if I do, I prove him right. That I am exactly who he thinks I am. And who is that? A surgeon who knows where to cut. Eleanor studied my face. You are afraid, she said. Yes? Of him. No, of myself. She nodded slowly, like she understood. Then let me help you, she said. How? By being the reason you do not have to. Before I could ask what she meant, I heard it. Horses, 3 of them, coming up the trail. I moved to the window and looked out through a crack in the shutters. 3 riders, Nathaniel in front, 2 men behind him, all armed. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin, dismounted, tied their horses to trees. Nathaniel walked forward alone. He was tall, well-built, clean-shaven. He wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His badge caught the last light of the sun. He stopped 20 feet from my door. "Tobias Cord," he called out. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "I know you're in there, and I know my wife is with you." I did not answer. "I am not here to hurt anyone," Nathaniel continued. "I just want Eleanor back. Give her to me, and we can all go home." Eleanor moved beside me. I held up a hand, shook my head. "I also know you went into my house," Nathaniel said. "I know you took Rose Calloway. That was a mistake, Tobias. She was evidence. And now you have contaminated the scene." He paused. "But I am willing to overlook that, if you come out. If we talk, man to man, teacher to student." I looked at Eleanor. "Stay here," I said quietly. "No matter what happens. Tobias, promise me." She hesitated, then nodded. I unbolted the door and stepped outside. Nathaniel smiled when he saw me. "There you are," he said. "I was starting to think you had forgotten your manners." "What do you want, Nathaniel?" "I told you, my wife." "She does not want to go with you. That is not for her to decide." "Yes, it is." Nathaniel's smile faded slightly. "You have changed, teacher. You used to understand that some people need to be told what is best for them. I was wrong. Were you, or did you just lose your nerve?" I took a step forward. "I reported you to Captain Hartwell," I said. "I told him what you did to that prisoner. I tried to stop you. You did. And do you know what happened after you left? They discharged you. No, they promoted me. Field surgeon, youngest in the Corps." I felt cold. "You are lying." "Am I check the records?" "Oh, wait. You cannot, because you deserted." Nathaniel walked closer. His hand rested on the revolver at his hip, but he did not draw. "The captain told them you were the one experimenting on prisoners," Nathaniel said. "He said I tried to stop you, that you threatened to kill me if I reported it. That is not true, but it is what they believed, and belief is all that matters." I understood then. Captain Hartwell had protected Nathaniel, not because he believed him, but because Nathaniel's father was a senator. And senators have long memories. "You destroyed my life," I said. "No, I saved it. If you had stayed, they would have court-martialed you, hanged you for war crimes. I gave you a chance to run, to disappear, to live. You call this living? Better than the alternative." Nathaniel glanced at the cabin behind me. "Where is she?" he asked. "Inside." "Bring her out." "No, that was not a request, and that was not an answer I am changing." Nathaniel sighed. "I did not want it to be like this," he said. "I really did not." He gestured to the 2 men behind him. They moved forward, both carrying rifles. I recognized one of them, a ranch hand named Miller. Big, slow. The kind of man who followed orders without thinking. The other I did not know. Younger, nervous. His rifle shook in his hands. "These men are witnesses," Nathaniel said. "They will testify that you kidnapped my wife, that you threatened to kill her, that you fired on us when we came to rescue her." "I have not fired anything. Not yet." Nathaniel drew his revolver, and that was when Eleanor stepped out of the cabin. She was holding my rifle, pointed directly at Nathaniel's chest. "Put the gun down, Nathaniel," she said. Nathaniel looked at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. Surprise. "Eleanor," he said softly, "what are you doing?" "What I should have done 5 years ago. You do not know how to use that. Tobias taught me, just like you taught him." Nathaniel smiled. Did he teach you where to aim, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger without flinching?" "Yes." "Then shoot me." Eleanor's hands tightened on the rifle. "Shoot me," Nathaniel repeated. "Right now, in front of these witnesses. Prove that you are strong enough." I stepped between them. "Eleanor, do not," I said. "Why not?" she asked. "He deserves it, because if you pull that trigger, you become what he wants you to be, someone who solves problems with violence. He solved his problems with violence, and look what it made him." Eleanor's arms were shaking now. Nathaniel watched her carefully. "You cannot do it," he said. "You are too weak. You always were." "I am not weak." "Then prove it." Eleanor's finger moved to the trigger, and that was when I heard another voice. "Put the rifle down." "Mrs. Hartwell." Father Dominic Hayes stepped out of the tree line. He was not alone. Samuel Way was with him, and behind them a dozen townspeople, men and women. Some I recognized from my trips to town. Others I did not. Mei-Ling Way was there, the blacksmith, the schoolteacher, the owner of the general store. They were not armed, but they were there, and that changed everything. Nathaniel turned slowly. "What is this?" he asked. "This," Father Dominic said, "is the truth coming to light." He walked forward, stopped beside me. "We found the room, Nathaniel. Under your house we found the chains, the instruments, the blood stains. That is my property. You had no right. We also found Rose Calloway. She is alive, and she is talking." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "She is delirious, sick. Anything she says cannot be trusted." "We also found Mei-Ling Way's journal with 8 names, 8 women who disappeared under your watch." Mei-Ling stepped forward. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of steel. "Where is my daughter?" she asked. Nathaniel did not answer. "Where is Lynn?" Mei-Ling asked again, louder this time. "She is gone." "Where?" "San Francisco, a hospital. I sold her for $200. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Mei-Ling's face did not change, but her hands clenched into fists. "Is she alive?" she asked. "I do not know. I did not ask." Samuel moved forward. His hand was on his gun. "You are under arrest," he said. Nathaniel laughed. "You cannot arrest me. I am the sheriff. Not anymore." Samuel reached up and unpinned his deputy badge, dropped it in the dirt. "I am a citizen now, and as a citizen I am making an accusation. Kidnapping, human trafficking, murder. You have no proof of murder, not yet, but we will find it." The 2 men behind Nathaniel looked at each other. Miller set his rifle down. The younger man did the same. They were not going to fight for him. Nathaniel stood alone now. He looked at Eleanor, then at me, then at the crowd. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. "You think justice exists out here? This is the territories. The law is whoever has the biggest gun." "No," I said. "The law is whoever people choose to follow, and they are not choosing you anymore." Nathaniel stared at me. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear, not of death, not of prison. Fear that everything he had built, everything he had taken, everything he had done, meant nothing. "You were supposed to understand," Nathaniel said quietly. "You and I, we were the same." "No," I said. "We were never the same. I taught you how to save lives. You learned how to take them. You taught me to cut without mercy. I taught you to cut without hesitation. There is a difference." Nathaniel shook his head. "You are a coward, Tobias. You ran because you could not handle what you created, but I stayed. I perfected it. You perfected nothing. You twisted it into something ugly. Beauty is in the eye of the surgeon." He raised his revolver, not at me, at Eleanor. "If I cannot have her," he said, "no one can." Time slowed. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw Eleanor's eyes widen, saw Samuel reaching for his gun. Too slow, all of it too slow. I moved without thinking, stepped in front of Eleanor. Felt the impact. The bullet hit me in the left shoulder, spun me around. I fell to my knees. Behind me, Eleanor screamed. In front of me, Nathaniel stood with the gun still raised. "You should have let her die," he said. "No," I said. "I should have stopped you 13 years ago." Samuel fired. 1 shot. It caught Nathaniel in the chest. Center mass. Perfect placement. Nathaniel looked down at the wound, then at Samuel. "Good aim," he said. Then he fell. Father Dominic rushed forward. knelt beside Nathaniel, checked for a pulse. He looked up and shook his head. It was over. I tried to stand, but my shoulder would not cooperate. Eleanor caught me before I fell. "Tobias," she said, "stay still. I am fine. You are bleeding. It is just a shoulder wound. I have had worse." Father Dominic came over, examined the wound quickly. "The bullet went through," he said. "Missed the bone. You will live." "Disappointing," I said. Eleanor was crying now, not from sadness, from relief. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because you were right. I needed a reason not to kill him, and you were that reason." She held me while Father Dominic bandaged my shoulder with strips torn from his shirt. The townspeople began to disperse, slowly, quietly, like they were leaving a funeral. Mei Ling stayed. She walked to Nathaniel's body and looked down at him. "My daughter," she said to Father Dominic, "can you help me find her?" "Yes. We will write to every hospital in San Francisco. Someone will know something." Mei Ling nodded, then she turned and walked away. Samuel stood over Nathaniel's body, his gun still in his hand. "I killed him," he said. "You stopped him," I said. "There is a difference." "Is there?" "Yes, you did not want to kill. You wanted to save. That matters." Samuel looked at me. "Will they hang me?" "No, it was self-defense. We all saw it." Father Dominic put a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Come back to the church," he said. "We will send for the marshal. Let him handle this." Samuel nodded. They carried Nathaniel's body down the mountain on a horse. The 2 hired men went with them, quiet, ashamed. Eleanor and I stayed at the cabin. She cleaned my wound properly, stitched it with the same precision I had taught her that afternoon. When she finished, she sat beside me on the bed. "What happens now?" she asked. "The marshal will come. There will be an inquest. They will want statements from everyone. And then you are free." Eleanor looked at her hands. "I do not know how to be free," she said. "You will learn. Will you help me?" I looked at her. "If you want." "I do." We sat in silence for a while. The fire burned low. Outside, the stars came out. "Tobias," Eleanor said quietly, "the things Nathaniel said, about Fort Benton, about Captain Hartwell, were they true?" I did not answer right away. "Some of it," I said finally. "I did teach men how to use pain as a tool. I thought I was preparing them for war, for impossible choices. But I was wrong. Some knowledge should never be shared. My father never told me what happened. He was protecting you, and maybe protecting himself. He made a choice, to believe a senator's son over a field surgeon. I do not blame him for that. I do not. He did what he thought was right. We all did, and we were all wrong." Eleanor leaned her head on my good shoulder. "Do you think Lin Wei is still alive?" she asked. "I do not know, but we will find out. We owe Mei Ling that much. What about the others? The other women on the list? We will find them too, or find out what happened to them. It will take time, but we will do it." Eleanor was quiet. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Will you stay in Bitterroot?" I looked around the cabin, at the simple furniture, the medical instruments I had kept hidden for 13 years, the life I had built in isolation. "I do not know," I said. "The town needs a doctor. The town has Father Dominic. He is a chaplain, not a surgeon. I am not a surgeon anymore. You operated on Rose today. You saved her life. That was an emergency. Life is an emergency, Tobias. Every day, people get hurt, sick. They need help." She lifted her head and looked at me. "You spent 13 years running from who you were. Maybe it is time to remember who you could be." I wanted to argue, to tell her it was too late, that I was too old, too broken, but I did not, because she was right. 1 year later, I stood outside a small building on Main Street in Bitterroot. The sign above the door read, "Hartwell Cord Medical Clinic," named after Captain James Hartwell, the man who had destroyed my career, and his daughter, the woman who had helped me rebuild it. Eleanor was inside preparing the examination room. She wore a clean white apron, and her hair was tied back. She had been studying with me for 12 months, learning anatomy, pharmacology, surgical technique. She was a better student than I had ever been. The door opened, and Mei Ling Wei entered. She was smiling. "Dr. Cord," she said, "I have news." I gestured for her to sit. "We found her," Mei Ling said. "Lin. She is alive." I felt relief wash over me. "Where?" "San Francisco. She was working as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. They had no record of her because Nathaniel sold her under a false name. But Samuel went there himself." He showed them her photograph. They recognized her immediately. "Is she well?" "She is thin, scared, but alive. Samuel is bringing her home next week." Mei Ling's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I did not find her. Samuel did. But you gave him the courage to look." After Mei Ling left, Eleanor came out of the back room. "That is 4, she said. 4 women. From the list we have found alive. Lin Wei, Rose Calloway, 2 others in Denver and Cheyenne. And the other 4, Eleanor's face darkened. "Still searching." I nodded. We had learned that Nathaniel had been part of a network. Sheriffs and lawmen across 3 territories, all of them selling people no one would miss to hospitals and medical schools that did not ask questions. The marshal had arrested 6 men so far, but there were more. There would always be more. "A patient is waiting," Eleanor said. "Boy with a broken arm, fell out of a tree." "Send him in," she smiled. "You are getting soft, Dr. Cord. A year ago, you would have told him to set it himself. A year ago, I was not a doctor." "What are you now?" I thought about that. "Someone trying to be better than he was," I said. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Then she went to get the patient. I stood at the window and looked out at Main Street. People were going about their day, shopping, talking, living, normal life. But I knew now that normal was a lie, that beneath every peaceful town were secrets, wounds, scars, and someone needed to tend to them. I turned back to my desk. On it was a letter from Father Dominic. He had been traveling to hospitals across the West, tracking down the women on Nathaniel's list. Following every lead, he had found 2 more, both alive. The work was slow, but it was work worth doing. The door opened and a boy walked in, maybe 10 years old, holding his left arm at an awkward angle. His mother followed behind him, nervous. "Dr. Cord," she said, "thank you for seeing us." "Of course, let me take a look." I examined the arm gently. Clean break, easy to set. "This will hurt for a moment," I told the boy, "but then it will feel much better." He nodded bravely. I set the bone with quick, practiced movements. The boy gasped but did not cry. Eleanor brought a splint and bandages. We worked together, smoothly, like we had done this 100 times. When we finished, the mother paid with eggs and a loaf of bread. We did not turn anyone away for lack of money. After they left, Eleanor and I cleaned the instruments in silence. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked. "Nathaniel." "Yes, every day." "Do you regret it? Any of it?" I thought about that question, really thought about it. "I regret teaching him," I said. "I regret not seeing what he was becoming. I regret the women who suffered because I ran instead of fighting. But I do not regret being here now, doing this, with you." Eleanor smiled. "Good, because I am not letting you run again. I am too old to run. You are 42, that is not old. It feels old. Then we will have to keep you busy." The door opened again. This time it was Samuel Wei. He was not wearing a badge anymore, but he carried himself like a lawman still. "Dr. Cord," he said, "I need your help." "What is wrong?" "There is a woman camped outside of town. She will not come in, will not talk to anyone, but she is sick, coughing blood." "How long has she been there?" 3 days. I grabbed my medical bag. "Show me." We walked to the edge of town, past the last houses, into the scrub brush. A woman sat beside a dying fire, thin, dirty, her eyes hollow. She looked up when we approached, saw the bag in my hand. "I do not need a doctor," she said. Her voice was rough. "You are coughing blood," I said. "You need medicine. I have no money." "I do not need money." She stared at me. "Why would you help me?" "Because I am a doctor, and you are sick." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Are you the surgeon? The one who worked with Sheriff Carver?" I stopped moving. "I knew him," I said carefully. "Why?" The woman reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I recognized it immediately. The list. "My sister's name is on here," the woman said. "I have been looking for her for 2 years. Someone told me to find you. They said you might know where she went." I took the paper, looked at the name she pointed to. "Sarah Mitchell, age 20, transferred 1886. "I will help you find her," I said. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Do you promise?" "Yes." She let me examine her. Tuberculosis, early stage. Treatable if we caught it now. I gave her medicine, brought her to the boarding house, paid for a room. That night I sat with Eleanor in the clinic. "There will always be more," she said quietly. "I know. We cannot save everyone." "No, but we can save someone, and that has to be enough." Eleanor took my hand. "It is enough," she said. Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season. And inside, in the clinic named after a man who had betrayed me and a woman who had saved me, I finally understood something. Redemption is not erasing what you did. It is choosing every single day to do better, to heal instead of hurt, to build instead of destroy, to teach the right lessons instead of the wrong ones. I had spent 13 years running from the surgeon I used to be, but maybe, just maybe, I was finally becoming the doctor I was always meant to be, and that was worth staying for. The fire burned warm. Eleanor fell asleep in the chair beside me, her head on my shoulder. Outside, the snow covered everything. Clean, white, new, a second chance. For all of us.